There are some people claiming that the entire heavyweight division is a disgrace and that none of the contenders are willing to fight each other. But that is simply not true. Every single division in boxing, during every single era in history, has good years and not so good years, fast years and slow years. You simply cannot have the same number of good fights every single year. It's not logistically possible. This year, 2023, has been a relatively slow year for most divisions in boxing. But curiously, there are people singling out the heavyweight division above all others for extra criticism. Now, some of these people are just forgetful, like I often am in my old age. I sometimes forget about fights that I just watched recently. But many other people who are criticizing the heavyweight division actually have a hidden agenda. They are Tyson Fury fanboys who want to take the heat off the Gypsy King for ducking and cherry picking by deflecting blame onto the rest of the division. One of these guys has a YouTube channel with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Now, I'm not saying that the heavyweight division minus Tyson Fury is perfect, but it compares equally, if not favorably, to most other divisions in boxing right now. And the degree of stagnation that does exist at heavyweight has mostly been created by Tyson Fury. Not entirely, but mostly. And I'll come on to that in a moment. But firstly, let's address this idea that no one's fighting each other. Alexander Usyk tried to fight Tyson Fury this year, but Fury priced himself out. Usyk then took on his mandatory in Daniel Dubois, and he's got 2 more mandatories lined up. If contenders weren't fighting each other, then Usyk wouldn't have all these mandatories. Eliminators were fought between contenders to create those mandatories. As for contender activity this year, Joe Joyce fought Zhilei Zhang twice. Filip Hrgović fought Dempsey McKean. They were both top 10 contenders. Ajagba fought Kosobutsky. They were also both top 10 contenders. Anthony Joshua and Dylan White were scheduled to fight. They were both top 10 contenders as well. White failed a test, of course, but the intention was there. Murat Gassiev is fighting Otto Wallin this weekend. They're both in the top 15. Fabio Wardley and David Adeleye are meant to be fighting on the Fury Ngannou card. They're both top 15 as well. Lania Perro, who's in the top 10, took the unbeaten record of Victor Faust. Jared Anderson fought a few times this year, not against top 10 opponents, but the Charles Martin fight was quite entertaining nonetheless. Now, let me ask you this. How many good fights can you remember at cruiserweight this year? Take your time. Or how about light heavyweight? Super middleweight? How about middleweight? Light middleweight? Super featherweight? You get the picture. 2023 has been a relatively slow year for most divisions in boxing. So to single out the heavyweight division above all others requires either a poor memory or a very selective one. When Filip Hrgović fought Dempsey McKean last month, Tyson Fury fans were absolutely trashing that fight. They derided it. They said it was a joke and that McKean was rubbish and Hrgović should be doing more to earn his title shot. But he'd already earned his title shot by beating Zhilei Zhang in a final eliminator. He was already mandatory. The Fury fans were acting like he should have gone above and beyond and taken the most dangerous fight possible while waiting for his shot against Usyk. Well, is that what Tyson Fury did when he was mandatory for Klitschko? Of course not. After beating Derek Chisora in a final eliminator back in November 2014, he had an easy run out against Christian Hammer before challenging Klitschko in November 2015. So these Fury fans are demanding that Hrgović take the type of risks that Fury didn't even take himself when he was mandatory. In fact, they're demanding that Hrgović take the type of risks that Fury won't even take now as champion. They want a mandatory challenger to have a tougher schedule and do more heavy lifting in the division than the actual world champion. You people are funny, oh. You are funny. And no, I'm not Nigerian, but you people are funny. World champions have perks and privileges which most contenders do not have, which is why we hold them to a higher standard and why they also have responsibilities and obligations. Now, the perks and privileges generally outweigh the responsibilities and obligations, which is why most contenders want to become champion. The problem is, if you're a talented fighter, the majority of champions aren't going to fight you voluntarily. You're going to have to win elimination matches against other contenders in order to force a mandatory shot. Sometimes you'll have to win 2 eliminators, but if you're lucky, it'll just be 1. And oftentimes, the guys you'll be fighting in these eliminators are people who the champions don't even want to face. So you often get really good fights. That's why this whole setup is so important. Think of the mandatory system as a conveyor belt, an assembly line. The sanctioning body orders a couple of eliminators first. The winners then move on to fight in a final eliminator, and the winner of that moves on to get a shot at the champion. After he's had his title shot, then a new eliminator will be ordered. That's how it works. Now, if there's a delay at any point on this assembly line, it causes a backlog. It causes stagnation. In late 2021, Alexander Usyk beat Anthony Joshua to become unified heavyweight champion, at which point he inherited AJ's mandatory schedule. Then AJ activated the rematch clause, and both guys started planning for that. But Usyk wanted to explore the possibility of fighting Tyson Fury first for Undisputed, and offered to pay AJ step-aside money. AJ agreed on the condition that he got a shot at the winner, and talks between Usyk and Fury began. Then, after several weeks of negotiations, Tyson Fury decides to randomly move the goalposts by demanding a tune-up fight. Bear in mind, he just fought Deontay Wilder a couple months earlier. What on earth would he need a tune-up fight for? This threw off everyone's schedule, caused various parties to question Fury's motives, and it ultimately scuppered the fight. And this had the effect of pushing back the Usyk-Joshua rematch and consequentially pushing back the mandatory schedule as well. Fast forward to September 2022. Usyk has just won the AJ rematch, and he starts negotiating with Tyson Fury again. Fury draws the negotiations out for about 6 months, moves the goalpost several times, and prices himself out. He wastes everyone's time again over a fight he had absolutely no intention of taking. This pushes the mandatory schedule back even further, and now Usyk's got a backlog of mandatories. And again, a sanctioning body typically won't order a new elimination match until the current mandatory has had his shot. So now Usyk has to fight all these guys back to back to back, which is quite an unusual thing for a champion to have to do. But it's all thanks to Tyson Fury. He's the reason that we haven't had new IBF and WBA eliminators this year. And as for the WBC, who Tyson Fury is the champion of, they ordered a final eliminator between Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz early this year. Normally in eliminators, the two sides are given 30 days to negotiate, and if they can't reach a deal within that period, a purse bid is ordered. After the purse bid, the fighters are given a deadline within which to fight each other. Normally it's 90 days. Inexplicably, the WBC did not do this with Wilder Ruiz. They allowed negotiations to drag on for about 6 months, and instead of ordering a purse bid, they just cancelled the fight. And to add insult to injury, they refused to order a new eliminator between two different fighters. They made the bizarre claim that to do so would not be in the best interests of boxing. Well, we know who it is in the best interest of. Tyson Fury, because he hasn't fought a mandatory in over a year, and he's been given carte blanche to fight a washed up Derek Chisora and a man who's never boxed before. So the WBC are deliberately halting their assembly line. They're deliberately delaying their mandatory schedule in order to accommodate Tyson Fury's cherry picking. They are his co-conspirators. These two parties are by far and away the biggest culprits for causing stagnation in the heavyweight division this year and damaging the division's reputation. No one else even comes close. If you take Tyson Fury and the WBC out of the equation, heavyweight is actually doing quite well. It's not perfect, but it's doing just as well, if not better, than the majority of divisions currently. Now, to address some of the issues in the heavyweight division that are not caused by Tyson Fury in the WBC. And these issues could just as easily apply to most other divisions, by the way. Nevertheless, the PBC heavyweights, Wilder, Ruiz, and Frank Sanchez, have been inactive. But that's typical of PBC fighters in many weight divisions. This isn't a heavyweight problem, it's a PBC problem. Just look at how inactive the Charlo brothers have been. Not just Jamal, but Jamel as well. Just look at Keith Thurman and countless other PBC fighters. They're notorious for it. And it's a problem that the WBC specifically could help to solve if they followed the standard mandatory protocol. Even after Wilder Ruiz fell through, they could have ordered Frank Sanchez to fight Makhmudov instead, for example. But they didn't. Nevertheless, we have to give Al Haymon some blame for not keeping his fighters more active. Also, Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn did mislead us over the Deontay Wilder fight. It was not locked in as they previously claimed. However, Anthony Joshua has still fought twice this year, and he did sign to fight Dillian Whyte. That was a perfectly acceptable crossroads match between two top 10 contenders at the time. Obviously, Whyte failed a test and the fight was cancelled, but the intention was there. Unforeseen circumstances can affect anyone. And all of this is relatively inconsequential anyway, since neither AJ Wilder or Dillian Whyte are world champions, and none of them are in negotiations with either of the world champions. So their actions have no effect over the mandatory schedule. Yes, we'd still like to see them fight each other, but the public knows that these guys are not top of the division anymore. Anthony Joshua couldn't even fill out the O2 Arena for his last 2 fights. He only holds about 18,000. Tyson Fury, on the other hand, what did he do? About 90,000 against Dillian Whyte? 50,000 against Derek Chisora? He's the face of the heavyweight division now. He's the world champion. His actions have a much greater impact than anyone else's, positive and negative. Now, there is another thing that can delay the mandatory schedule, and that's heavyweight title rematches. I can accept rematch clauses for unifications or voluntary defenses, but I cannot accept rematch clauses for mandatory defenses. It's a relatively new thing that started during the Klitschko era, and it needs to stop. Fury Klitschko 2 should never have been on the table. Usyk Joshua 2 should never have happened. And you can't just blame the champions either, because the challengers are complicit. Mandatory challengers are under no legal obligation to sign for a rematch, but some of them are choosing to do so, presumably to get some extra money. Fury, Klitschko, Usyk, and Joshua have all been culprits of this in the past. The sanctioning bodies need to put a stop to it. It's bad for boxing. But by far the biggest culprit for causing stagnation and damaging the reputation of the heavyweight division right now in 2023 is the Gypsy King, aided and abetted by the WBC. Hence, that is where I appropriately focus the bulk of my criticism. Anyone who tries to spread the criticism around evenly across the whole division is like a judge in court handing down the same sentence for bank robbery as he would for shoplifting. Justice does not mean giving all criminals the same punishment irrespective of the crime. Justice is making the punishment fit the crime by order of severity. Tyson Fury fans would rather destroy the reputation of the entire heavyweight division than have him receive the amount of criticism he actually deserves. An evil enemy will burn his own nation to the ground to rule over the ashes. That's Tyson Fury and his fans in a nutshell. After pricing himself out of the Usyk fight, Fury said that he offered title shots to Andy Ruiz and Anthony Joshua. Neither of those fights happened for whatever reason. Maybe Ruiz wanted more money than Fury was willing to pay. Maybe AJ didn't have the confidence coming off back-to-back losses. But that's no big deal, because you've still got 13 other contenders in the WBC top 15 to choose from. Frank Sanchez and Martin Bakole, who are both highly ranked, said they were available. Fury ignored them, of course, and shortly afterwards announced the fight against a man who's never boxed before. This is literally Jake Paul territory. But Jake Paul can be forgiven to some extent because he's only a novice, whereas Tyson Fury is a reigning world heavyweight champion. Think of the damage that's doing to the reputation of boxing. His fans say that guys like Sanchez and Makhmudov haven't earned a shot. Well, what had a washed-up Derek Chisora done to earn his shot? What has a boxing debutante in Francis Ngannou done to earn his fight with Tyson Fury? You guys make me laugh. It's not like we're asking Tyson Fury to do something unprecedented here. When Anthony Joshua was world champion, he offered Dillian Whyte a title shot in early 2019. You guys remember that? When Whyte turned it down, he offered Jarrell Miller the fight. When Miller tested positive, he offered Luis Ortiz the fight for a career-high payday, but Ortiz turned it down. He then offered it to Adam Kaunacki, who was unbeaten at the time, but he turned it down as well. And finally, he offered it to Andy Ruiz, who accepted. AJ negotiated with 5 different fighters. If you really want to defend your belt against a credible contender, just start at the top of the rankings and work your way down. You'll always find someone. If AJ did it when he was champion, why can't Tyson Fury do it now? He's supposed to be so much better than AJ, right? So why is he picking people like a washed-up Derek Chisora and Francis Ngannou? What's that all about? With Tyson Fury's championship reign this year, he says that AJ, who was coming off 2 losses at the time, didn't want the fight, and that somehow justifies him skipping over 13 or 14 other contenders in the WBC rankings to take on an MMA fighter instead. I mean, you've got to laugh. In fact, let me give you a quote from Tyson Fury in a recent interview with Sky Sports. When asked about fighting top contenders, he said, "I have no interest in fighting those guys because I'm bigger than all of them. I'm a superstar. They're nobodies. I'm happy. They're not. I have everything they want and there's nothing they can do about it apart from get in line, get their self-mandatory by 10 organizations and fight eliminator after eliminator for no money." So he's telling you outright that he has absolutely no intention whatsoever of fighting any dangerous contenders voluntarily. And since the WBC won't impose a mandatory on him, then it's going to be cherry pick after cherry pick. I'm praying that the vulnerability Usyk showed against Daniel Dubois and the deep pockets of Frank Warren's new partners in Saudi will be enough to finally entice Mr. Fury to take that Usyk fight next year. I mean, you got a dream, right? And before I go, I want to give a shout out to all the new subscribers to my Patreon page. I cover loads of different topics in my weekly podcast, as you can see on screen right now, from current events to deep dives down the rabbit hole and everything in between. I'm really enjoying the feedback and the discussions we've been having on there lately. So if you'd like to join the conversation, just click the link in the description box below. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.